See, it seems that when Amos, a man from Tekoa, a city in Judah, went north and visited the land of Israel, and went to the city of Bethel where there was a sanctuary for the people of Israel, he got in a bit of trouble. It seems that the priest at that sanctuary, a certain Amaziah, got very upset with him. Told him off, told him that as an outsider, as a man from Judah in the south, he really had no business there. But worse than that, Amos was there in order to tell the Israelites what to do, how to run their country, how to take care of their religious affairs. It was there because God had sent him. And Amaziah figured that Amos had no business whatsoever doing that. Amaziah was annoyed. And I get that. I mean, I understand why he was annoyed. Who wouldn't be? I mean, don't we all hate it when some foreigner comes to our place, our country, and tells us what to do? How would you feel if an American came here and told us how we ought to run our government in Canada? For that matter, how would you feel if a Buddhist came here to St. Andrews and told us how we ought to worship God? Nobody reacts favorably to people who do that kind of thing. Even if they're right. Even if the point they're making is absolutely valid, which of course was the case when Amos went to Bethel. Nobody wants to hear them. And so Amos was dealing with that, but there was something else that Amos was dealing with. And he was dealing with an assumption that Amaziah made. Amaziah assumed that Amos was there and that he was preaching and he was doing God's work as a professional. Accused him of being a seer, a professional religious person, what we might call a priest, or a preacher, or a minister, or maybe a missionary. And Amos reacted to that assumption on the part of Amaziah, and he reacted in a surprising way because Amos said back to him, I am no prophet, nor a prophet's son. In other words, I'm not a professional. This is not my job. Which is really quite an extraordinary thing when you think about it, because up until this point in the history of the people of Israel, the ministry of God's word, the ministry of God's work in the world has been carried out by professionals. By people who do it as a full-time job. And most often, as indicated in what Amos says, most often, it is a job that is passed down from father to son, down through the generations. But Amos says something different. No, he's not part of that. He is not a professional. This is not his day job. His day job, it turns out, is being a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore trees. But he's left that behind. He's left behind what he does all the time, and he has come to Israel for one reason and one reason only, because God told him that he had to. The Lord took me from following the flock, and the Lord said to me, go and prophesy to my people Israel. And I can't help but look at that and ask the question, yes, okay, but what about the sycamore trees? I mean, what about what Amos has left behind? He has responsibilities. He has herds to take care of. He has sycamore trees to dress. Think of the sycamore trees, the poor, naked sycamore trees, with no one to dress them. What's going to happen to them? I'm going to bring all of this up, because I think what we see happening in that passage in the book of Amos actually parallels something that's going on in the church today. We are seeing many shifts in the Christian church in these early years of the 21st century, of course. Many changes. But one of the key changes we are seeing has to do with the ministry and the mission of the church. For there was a time when it was just assumed that the ministry of the church, the mission of the church, belonged to the professionals, the people who did it full time. And so the job of a church, the job of a congregation was to raise the money and hire a pastor or a minister or maybe a priest, and that priest or minister would go out, and he or she would do the work of the church, would pray the prayers, would visit the people, would do the pastoral care, would do the direct ministry. And the mission of the church was also undertaken in very much the same way. The mission of the church was done by the professionals, the people whose job it was full-time. They made a career of it, and they went overseas, and they built the schools, and they established the churches, and they founded the hospitals, and they kept it all going. And that was how it worked. They did the mission of the church. The people back home, they raised the money, and they sent it, and they prayed for them. But the missionaries, the professionals, did it. And I don't want to criticize that model, because indeed a lot of great good was accomplished in that world using that model, but it seems that we have come to a time when that model of the ministry and mission of the church is no longer enough. Because you see, it turns out that the mission of the church is far too important and far too meaningful and far too rewarding to simply leave it into the hands of the professionals. And so we see in the church today that all of God's people are taking up the mission of the church. This is a good thing, but it is a different thing. We're also learning, I think, a lesson that maybe Amos might have missed. We are learning that when we go far afield, we don't come in as these outside experts who have all the answers and who have, these Western approaches that will always work. We are learning that if we are going to accomplish anything, that we actually need to work in partnership alongside the people who are already there. The people who are going to be there long after we're gone. And today we're celebrating them. We are celebrating all of those people who over the years, and there have been many, many, who over the years have gone out from St. Andrews and have done amazing things in places like Hungary, in the Ukraine, Malawi, many other countries all over the world. And they have reached out and they have touched people and they have loved people in practical ways, and they have learned to work alongside with partners, as partners with the people who are already there. And indeed, we also celebrate those people who have not necessarily gone so far afield and yet have worked hard to reach out to people in our community and far beyond our community. We celebrate this. It's well worth celebrating, and a sign of the life and the vitality of this, our congregation. But I'm still going to ask the question, what about the sycamore trees? What about the herds that people leave behind when they go even on a short-term mission trip? What about their responsibilities and the lives that they leave behind? Isn't that important too? And it comes up in the life of the church, because whenever we talk about the mission of the church and maybe of undertaking some new project to reach those outside our doors or to minister to people on the other side of the world, the question does come up, what about the sycamore trees? In other words, what about our church? What about our church and what it needs? Because our church has needs. We got a budget to meet. We got a building to take care of. We got our own people to look after. And won't that all suffer if we begin to focus our resources elsewhere? People say that, I think, because there is an underlying assumption that the resources of the churches are limited. There's only so much to go around, and if we begin to direct some of those resources and some of that wealth elsewhere to people outside the church or people in other countries, it means that there's less for us here. So what about the sycamore trees? Of course, we're looking at it wrong. I mean, when we get to thinking like that, we are missing the point, because, of course, the point of the church is to reach out, is to have that outreach ministry, to touch the people of the world with Christ's love. And if we lose sight of that and we forget it, and unfortunately churches do lose sight of that and forget it, Well, then it begins to become a real question, well, what's the point? Why are we even doing all of this? And so the sycamore trees also then begin to suffer. And the other thing, of course, is that the underlying assumption is just wrong. That the resources are limited, that there's only so much to go around. Because our resources are supplied by God. It is God who gives us what we need, and God has promises that if we remain faithful to our calling, and if we listen to what He's calling us to do in our community, in our world, that He will provide the resources. Both for what we're doing and reaching out, and for what we need at home. And it's only when the church forgets what we're really called to do that we begin to run into resource problems at home. So we celebrate. Celebrate those who have gone. We celebrate some incredible work that has been done by people in this congregation over the years. And we look forward to what we will go on to do in the future, exciting things. And we give thanks. Thanks to the God who supplies us what we need most. Will you take a few moments in silence?